impact of COVID on O&M services. Oh, thank you. Um, Also is Dr. Tina Hertzberg from the University of South Carolina Upstate. Dr. Hertzberg is a professor and coordinator of visual impairment program at the University of South Carolina Upstate. She serves as the principal investigator of the federally funded Braille training grant, Project Inspire, increasing the STEM potential of individuals who read Braille. Previously, she served as the general education math and English teacher, an itinerant TVI, a COMS, and a team leader for the Regional Service Center. I've heard both of these people speak, and I can tell you we're in for a treat. I will let you guys take it on. This is going to be orientation, mobility, referrals, and assessments.
Thank you, Kristen. So I also put a link in the chat, which is a Dropbox link to our PowerPoint. So you're welcome to download and if you want to follow along there or just have it for later. That PowerPoint also there's a link to some other stuff I'm going to show that's in there. And then it also has our emails at the end. Thank you all for joining us. And okay. So we're going to be talking about some research that Tina and I have worked on and try to focus on like practical implications for professionals. And then we also just want to have some discussions about these various topics related to O&M referrals, and the different practices that people use. So we're going to be talking about what O&Ms and TBIs consider to be most important for O&M referrals. We're going to talk about the different requirements and how they vary by state. And by the end of this, you should be able to implement 3 collaboration strategies to make sure you're kind of creating appropriate O&M referrals and or assessments. So just looking at the background of this, essentially there hasn't really been well-established guidelines or consistency or just agreement on what people think should even be in a comprehensive assessment. And that's going back to the literature review they did about 20 years ago. And the other thing from a previous study that Tina and I had done where we asked TVIs essentially how often do they refer students for O&M assessments as part of like a functional vision assessment, or how often do they consider that or do a screening or any type of thing like that. And when it came to specifically students with multiple disabilities, that was under 50% as far as what people that typically even really consider that for those students. So there is definitely still some holes in how we provide these services. There's a couple different models for how this typically works across the country. There are different approaches to this, and I'm sure at least most of you might be aware, at least for Texas, what it is, because that has been kind of the states at the forefront of really promoting every kid getting an assessment. So in Texas, the law, every student that gets evaluated for VI services also gets assessed for O&M, and that is to include unfamiliar environments, and you see the word community environments in there as well. So pretty comprehensive. Again, I think part of that is the number of O&Ms that they tend to have in Texas, which certainly helps, but yeah, it's really probably the most comprehensive of anywhere as far as what kids actually get assessed. Uh, Other states have different approaches. So Michigan, essentially, it is a specific acuity threshold and or visual field threshold. And again, this is probably going to apply to, I mean, most students that are going to qualify for services anyway. So there's a pretty good standard to have as far as what's actually being looked at. Then the other approach that was somewhat similar, but kind of different approach and different wording, essentially in Maryland, talking about uh, it has to consider students' age, current and future needs, and how they function in familiar and unfamiliar environments. So again, fairly uh, comprehensive. So different approaches, you can kind of see how these at least are a lot better than some of the other things that we're going to talk about shortly. And so this is a quote from the research study that we're actually going to be talking about for a good part of our presentation. And this is a response specifically from a TBI and kind of shows you at least some of the issues that we're dealing with, as TBIs are usually going to be that person that in districts where there's not an O&M readily available, it's going to be up to the TBI to make that referral. And so the quote is, currently my districts rely on the TBI to make referrals. I do not feel it is effective. Other TBIs predetermine that a student does not need O&M, often based on cognitive ability and or current level of independence, and therefore do not refer. I have taken over TBI caseloads and I've found many students I then referred for O&M assessments, going on to provide them with O&M services, who went years without a referral. And that's kind of inferring previously. So it's, you can kind of see the good and bad aspects of, it's kind of dependent on the TBI and their preparation and, you know, all of the other things that they might be kind of dealing with, which is also pretty full caseloads. So we just kind of wanted to have a discussion about some of this stuff as we're going through, and just more, a lot of our research is trying to focus on people's experiences. And we would also just like to get input from people here as far as, you know, what are the pros and cons of this process where you work, or does anyone have any thoughts? Oh, sorry. I should add, you're welcome to add to the chat or raise your hand if you would like to speak. We were going to try and do it that way instead of just having people kind of jump in.
How do you raise your hand on that?
Oh, yeah. I have the same question. You raise your hand?
I'm actually looking for how you do that. I
Oh,
see it's in the reactions tab if you're, no, yeah, in the
Oh,
reactions tab if you're on the phone.
okay, here we go. Is that it?
I mean, if it doesn't work, we can just have people speak. That's fine too.
Well, my hand is raised.
Okay.
Let's start with Vicky then. Hey.
Yeah, let's start with Vicky.
Okay, sorry. Um, yes. So I noticed and I'm in North Carolina, that yes, I think here that I have run into much of what you just discussed previously about the TBI makes the decision of whether there's an O&M assessment. And I think many times it is based on probably just the cognitive level, the independence, just kind of how they appear to move at school, and but it definitely isn't a situation where every student that is being referred for vision services is also referred for O&M. So that is not the case, in my opinion, and my experiences so far.
Thank you, Vicky.
Mhm.
One of the Noras is raising their hand, the yellow Nora.
Nora? Or Judy?
I don't think I have my hand up. I gave a
Oh,
thumbs up
sorry.
for the
Sorry.
opening code.
Okay.
The opening code is referral, by the way. There is something in the chat from Kim Warshaw Rothman. Our TVI does give us a referral. Our district has a referral form and the VI is not even included on it. I asked my program specialist to revise it or let me know who to call. That was not effective last year.
Well, so not even O&M, but VI. Wow. Well, I'm hoping
Yeah.
that gets changed for you and updated.
This is the real Nora from Texas Tech. For some reason, my students are under my name and I don't know why. So just so you know, it's not me. 16.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Can I just, to one of the Noras who said that, I think I know
Yeah.
which one you are. Do you mind if I just unmute you? I'm just gonna unmute you. Or ask you to unmute.
Thank you, Kristen.
Mm-hmm. All right,
Maybe-
Brandy, you can unmute.
Maybe the real Nora has to unmute herself so that the student can be unmuted. I don't know.
So mine does say Nora on it instead of Brandy, and that's what I just looked at just a minute ago. So I'm like, my name is Brandy. So in my district, we don't have very many TBIs or O&M. I don't even think that we have one. We were talking about it today with my assistant principal. I know that they have two TBIs. Only one knows Braille, and they won't let, because I have somebody else, and I know that Dr. Nora Shirley Griffin knows her, Tony Hollingsworth, that comes in. She used to come to our school also to help, but they won't even allow her to come into our school anymore. So it's been a fight just to be able to get services for our kids at our school, because they won't even come to our school because we're all special needs.
That makes it really tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brandy.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Okay,
so
we have another one in
sorry.
the chat if you want that one.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
Okay. All right. So this is from Catherine Caswell. It says, I work at a provincially funded rehab center in Quebec, Canada. Clients have provided an external optometry. Clients have to provide an external optometry or ophthalmology report in order to open a file at the center and must have a visual diagnosis. We have an internal low vision optometrist that the client see first, then they are referred. Sorry, it moved on me. then they are referred based on the needs or difficulties expressed during the appointment. And we have a multidisciplinary team. So we also get referrals from low vision therapists, social workers, occupational therapists. If these specialists have clients that express need during their own interventions, then they refer to our clinical coordinator or O&M services. And then Lacey Tipner says have to ask to be added to consent for testing for upcoming IEPs of students that I know need O&M.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what we have definitely heard. It's so challenging when you can't get the support of the other people that you actually work with. It makes it tough. So we have a couple different questions throughout that we're going to ask, and then we will have time, or we should have time for questions at the end as well. And so I am going to hand it off to Tina and let her talk more about the actual like referral process.
And there is something in the chat for all of the Noras, just in case you're wondering. You might want to check it out, that if you find your face and click on the 3 dots, when you hover over your picture, you can change your name. You can rename yourself. I hope that'll help. So we thought it might be helpful to talk a little bit about screening tools that TVIs might be using. And when we are referring to a screening tool, we're talking about either a formal or informal process that's used to determine whether a student should be referred for an O&M assessment. So I live in a state, South Carolina, where it is an IEP team decision. And so it does a lot of times come, if the TBI doesn't mention it, it's very likely it's not going to come up at all. Right now, we have one of our O&Ms who is actually developing a kind of a screening tool that we are hoping that might be able to be used across the state. So I'm really excited. I'm hoping that we're going to see more consistency once that's done. So I'm hoping like even in a year that we might just even like within our small state have more consistency. Depending where you are, sometimes TBIs include some type of O&M screening as part of their functional vision assessment or functional vision evaluation, depending on where you live, or they may actually use like a form or a different process. But there is significant variation. Number one, depending if it's done at all. And then second, it really depends on the professional, the district, and where they live, the state, as to how that is conducted. So once an actual referral has been made, that is the official process where a need for an O&M assessment has been identified through the IEP process. And that's where it becomes the responsibility of an O&M specialist. And there's variations by states and districts and how this process is completed. Now, it was interesting because in the survey, we had TBIs, duly certified TBIs, as well as O&Ms. And there was a chance for them to like open-ended kind of describe their processes and things that were working and things that were not. And this does not surprise me. I'm wondering, I doubt it will surprise anyone else, but this is actually a slide that Justin created, but I absolutely love this because I think it's true. But what I'd like to see is there's a red line after the first two, and I would love to see the possibility of this line like moving. So the two groups of students, I think in most places where we do a really good job of referring students, when children are blind, I think we do a good job with that. And with children who have significantly reduced vision that, visibly affects their mobility, once again, I think we do a pretty good job of that. But then we have this red line where depending kind of where you are and who's involved, whether these students get appropriately referred or not. Children with low vision that are independent depending on the situation and environment. I think back to a situation at a school for the blind that a student that was in high school and knew the building inside and out. And if you only looked at her traveling within that very familiar environment, even like from the dorms to the school, she did phenomenal. But it was like a different student when you took her downtown or you took her to an unfamiliar environment where she became a very hesitant traveler. And so this is one who I suspect for years probably should have been receiving O&M, but only in high school was this really even coming up to be a referral. And so this really, she kind of fits with the second one. Children who have no observable mobility issues. Like I said, if you only looked at her in her familiar environments, I mean, she was rocking it. It was really only when it was an unfamiliar environment where that you could definitely see there were some needs. And then children with additional disabilities that may impact their actual or perceived mobility. I think once again, this kind of depends on the people involved, but there are sometimes I really wonder if we have children with additional disabilities that really could benefit from an assessment and services. So one day I'm really hoping that we can move that red line to the very bottom where we do a great job with all of our students. So one thing we didn't really hear about, and I know there's some of y'all from Texas, I would love to hear like a perspective from Texas, just because y'all do, I mean, to me, it's kind of like the standard, the gold standard that I can only hope that one day we will get to here in South Carolina. I mean, is it really working? Are you seeing that it's really making a difference? Oh, and there's actually someone in the chat talking about my districts in San Antonio, which I'm thinking is in Texas. And it's very good about always including O&M to the initial or annual card for any student with visual impairment. My district is NISD. Good for them. And so not just even the initial, also the annual. Anybody else from Texas willing to share? Texas School of the Blind must have an O&M. Well, I know one of their math teachers is an O&M certified, but I suspect that they have some full-time O&Ms. I would be very surprised if they don't. Oh, the Texas School for the Blind must have an O&M at their annual like art meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fantastic. Wow. So every time there's a meeting, then like I said, I just have to imagine that really just makes a huge difference. So what was our purpose of the study? And I think part of this comes I'm originally from Texas, but I've been here now in South Carolina for 17 years, and I just see a lot of variation. And so it really was to examine professionals' perspective on what should be considered when determining whether a student should receive an O&M assessment. And then really kind of to explore what are the positive and negative effects of different types of referral models. So a little bit about who participated in our survey. We had 97 TVIs. We had 72 O&M specialists and 94 duly certified professionals from 37 US states. 88% were females. 50% have been teaching 15 or more years. And 89% were providing services as an itinerant. So only the TVIs, not the duly certified and the O&Ms, but only the TVIs, is they were asked a question, is do you complete an O&M screening for your students? And this was also in states where there were not like specific like requirements in Texas. So basically it's only for the TVIs who lived in states where it was an IEP decision. So 45% of them said they always conduct screenings. 21% of them said they usually conduct a screening. 22% said they sometimes complete a screening, and 12% said never. Now, of course, I wish we would have maybe said right afterwards, like, tell us more about, or like the never. How does it happen then? But we did not right there. So what are your thoughts on TBIs completing O&M screenings? Anybody have any thoughts on that you're willing to share with us? We really do want to hear from you. Susanna is saying she thinks it offers more opportunities for collaboration. Okay. Kristen?
I was going to say, for our screenings, we usually have the classroom teacher and the TBI do it, and the parent, if I can, for the screening, even just the screening.
So it's you, the parent, and the classroom teacher and the TBI?
A classroom teacher, the TBI, because sometimes these are initials, and so the TBI
Okay.
doesn't know the student. And then, but we always get the parent to complete it because they know about what they're doing when they're not at school.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, that's great. Couple things in chat. Let's see. I found that TBIs need constant training on what they should be looking for. Well, and that's cool that that they have you to be able to, Rebecca, to be able to come back to, and that you can kind of keep on. I don't know if there's a way around like constantly retraining. And I don't know if that's like turnover or if that's like just a reminder or yeah. And there's someone else. Let's see, Lizzie. I might not be pronouncing your name correct. Is it Lisa Schlifner? So says, I think we need to complete separate screenings as we look through a different lens. Yeah, I do think that there is some definite truth to that, that I will say that I think I was always just, because I was a TBI much longer before coming an O&M, and I was always, if I had any kind of like doubt at all, I would refer, just absolutely. But I do think that now, just looking back, what have I, I think I do see that a little bit of a different lens than maybe I did then. And would I have done some things differently is probably. So several new messages on this one. I don't understand the thought process of why the 12% never. Yeah, that's why I was saying I wish we would have followed up with that. Like if you said never, tell us more, because I really want to know. But we don't have that opportunity because we didn't, it was an anonymous survey because we really wanted people to be able to share what was happening. And we thought if it was anonymous that people would feel freer to be very honest about what was happening. But Caroline, I agree. So I really wish that's like, if we've been thinking, we would have said, please tell us more. Lacey. Oh, sorry, Lacey. As soon as you said that, I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Just got one in the chat. Let's see if I can go up to it. I agree with parents completing a screening.
I mean, that makes sense. They definitely know their kid very well,
Yeah.
or at least better than.
Well, and I agree because especially like, the TBI, we may only see them, like they may only see them mostly in classes, maybe the hallways, unless they're very intentionally like go and like, oh, I want to see how they travel like when they're getting off the bus, or I want to see how they're traveling in the lunchroom, and how many TBIs would necessarily think about that. And so parents, like, I'm just thinking about when they go out to the grocery store, when they're going places on the weekends, when, how about like after, like when it starts getting dark at night? Does that make a difference in how they travel? So just like, this is from Ember, just like any student that's being referred for special education, oops, I just lost it. The parents complete a survey. Oh, and so here, someone's saying that the TBI actually has to be duly certified to be able to do the O&M screenings. So are there some places then that the O&Ms are actually doing the screenings? So we follow up on the referrals as O&Ms. Okay.
Okay.
And then Kendra was saying that most of her TBIs actually reach out directly to her, so they don't, that she comes out and it sounds like does the observation, and there's not really a formal screening for them to do. It's more of having her come out.
Oh, Brandy?
So even here in Mississippi, TBIs are not allowed to do that also. We're not allowed to guide them. We're not allowed to do anything unless we have O&M behind us.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be such different approaches depending on where you are.
Yeah, totally agree with that. So Kristen's asked,
Kristen?
Yeah, I was just saying, even the screening, because I mean, I don't even get called in until after a screening has been done. That's how they know they need to call me.
I think there are places where an O&M is supposed to be involved in the screening, but that's more of a local thing, not like a state thing, I think.
sounds like
Oh, and
Joanne, that screenings can be done by either the TBI or O&M, but that changes for an assessment. Yeah, I think here a lot of the TBIs actually do, and I know that's something that we talk a lot about in our training program. I know, like for ours in South Carolina, you don't have to take one O&M class to be a TBI, and so that's why we've intentionally now like put some like maybe a little repetitive, but I want to make sure everybody gets it. So we've had to like put it in like 2 places to make sure that everybody leads with that.
all right. Well, thank you all very much. We have some other things I'm gonna kind of go back to in the presentation, and we will definitely have more time for questions and comments. Oh, and Kristen, process in Louisiana is anyone can do the screening, and it must be done if there are any visual problems. Okay. Yeah, that seems like a pretty good approach. I don't remember, Tina, was this mine or yours?
I don't either, so go for it.
Okay. So again, this is a quote from a TBI in this kind of research that we're talking about. And essentially, when asked like what is that referral process like in your state, and essentially the answer was it is fairly nebulous. I think a big part of the IEP team decision is the parents' feedback. Many parents are reluctant to add O&M services even if their child needs them long term. They will say the child gets around just fine right now, or they don't travel alone much. It is harder for some parents to let go. I think they also have some concerns about their child using a white cane and potential stigma or attracting attention, which I think kind of a great follow-up to some of what we were just talking about, where I mean, you kind of want as much input from everyone on the IEP team, from the TBI and the parent, and hopefully an O&M. But yeah, it definitely seems like there are a number of cases where the parents might be pretty reluctant to add O&M or really push for this. So we had just asked essentially what is the process in your state? And so essentially we gave options, and it was pretty interesting to see what the results are. So O&M assessment required for every child with VI, which would be states like Texas, or again, there were a couple other states and people that kind of gave that response depending on maybe how they were interpreting their state requirements. But at least most of these were pretty consistent, that like people in the same state were giving the same answer for the most part. So you can see how this kind of broke down for the individuals taking their survey. And so we had other categories of based on visual acuity or visual field. It's an IEP team decides if an O&M assessment is appropriate, which is by far the biggest category, with like 40 to like 60%. Or probably the most concerning one is people that had responded to a survey about O&M referrals, and the answer was they don't know what the requirements are. And that also seems concerning. So we had people that responded to the survey that were TBIs, that were O&M specialists, and that were dual certified as TBI and O&M. And had like 20% of those people kind of saying that they don't know what the requirements are. It does seem pretty concerning. I know in some cases people did explain some of their answers, and in like some states they have a specific policy in their district that is kind of more inclusive and comprehensive than what the state requires. So I mean, that can kind of make sense that it might be something they're just not really aware of what the rest of the state does. But still, that seems high for people to not know what it actually is. So we also asked about what do they consider. So if you are involved in this process, what are the things that you think are most relevant and need to be considered in this process? And again, so you can see there are a number of O&Ms that are involved in the actual referral process and at least get some input in what is considered. So at least it was pretty encouraging to see what people viewed as like the most important, and ideally what's going to be most relevant to O&M, with the greatest being ocular history, and then current level of mobility, medical history, if they use another mobility device like a wheelchair or walker. It was at least nice to see that was a lower percentage as far as whether that's actually considered, because that doesn't seem like it should be a primary thing. And also nice to see one of the at least lower considered thing was whether they have an intellectual impairment, which again, we kind of know students with multiple disabilities at least being least likely to be referred.
So Justin, we got a few things in the chat. Starting kind of going backwards for Lacey, we didn't learn about referrals in school. I'm teaching myself as I'm learning the job. So good for you for, just keeping on learning. And I will tell you that in our survey, there were some that they said in their the quotes and the things they would tell us. That's exactly what they said, that they didn't really talk about it when I was in school. And so it is one of those things that hopefully that across time that, with mentors and just, research yourself, that it will get much easier, I would say. But good for you from the very first of, teaching yourself. And then there were several ranging from yikes, that's scary, and that was concerning, and that's about the 20% not knowing about what the state requirements were. And then going back even before then about the parents. And first it was Kristen who talked about that, the cane's a really big deal for parents of some kids. And I would totally agree that I think emotionally that it is a really big deal. And I do think that is a part of sometimes the reactions of what we're seeing. And then, yes, from Raina, I have met some parents who said they really didn't want their child to be labeled. I think that I got everything. That's it for now.
Thank you, Tina. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's definitely one of the things that I think professionals struggle with is parents' kind of reluctance and not wanting to really face that their child has a visual impairment or it's severe enough to actually require a cane. I think that's, sometimes they get VI services, but not O&M because of that.
So we just got another one from Susanna. I have a student that culturally her father doesn't allow her to bring her cane home.
Yep. I think that's far too common. So I do have another quote here, and there was a couple of things in here that I think kind of emphasized a couple of things we wanted to mention. So another quote from a TBI, and their response is that I am not allowed to go to students' homes or observe them outside of the school. Some of my students have memorized the school campus, but really need O&M for unfamiliar environments. So far, I haven't been able to get sufficient services. Every school is different. In my school, I recommend it. It takes a long time to get an assessment and services started, like almost a year. So kind of coming back to that idea of, I mean, if you're only ever able to see kids in familiar environments, you're missing like a huge part of what we really need to consider. And I mean, I feel like I've seen this so many times where there's almost no consideration that it might be a good thing to actually see them in like another environment. And I know sometimes you can do this with like field trips, but that can be tough too. Or, if they're actually available to go on the field trip.
The other part of that quote to me that really struck me was that it takes a long time to get an assessment and services started, so that even if you really think you have a student who needs services, to think that it takes a year to get everything to happen so they begin those services, that's hard. That's really hard. And sadly, I think there are some places, especially that in rural communities, where there's not an O&M close by, or that, sadly, that there's a shortage where there's just not enough O&Ms to go around. That sometimes this really does happen.
Yep. So I think that is one of the things that maybe we haven't said directly, but a lot of what we're talking about does relate to places where there's not enough O&Ms, but also like rural communities, because that's where the TBI ends up being relied on as the person, because there's only one TBI and probably maybe no O&M, and they're the only ones that know anything about O&M, and it kind of falls to that person to be able to say, hey, we should probably look at screening for O&M with these students. But again, there's the shortage and there's the just lack of professionals. And like in Kentucky, we end up relying on independent contractors for a lot of places, and they're covering like 10 counties in some places. So it just gets to be kind of impossible to really get adequate services. And it's hard to tell, what all is actually contributing to students not being referred.
So Kristen's put 2 messages in the chat. Several school districts have issues with teachers working with students off campus. I struggled with that in my early years of teaching as a dual certified teacher. And then she continued, the shortage is real. The student population is growing, but the professional pool is dwindling. We just got another one. Raina says, yes, I agree. We're seeing it more and more.
Yeah, it's I think we almost that is in one of the quotes that we got too. The shortage is real because that kind of exact idea that people are continually struggling with this. And I mean, at being in university preparation programs, essentially we're doing about everything that we can, but still, I agree, it's not even keeping up to the demand that we currently have, not even considering, again, we're probably talking about a lot of students that could or should be getting services.
Well, and I know like here in South Carolina that depending on where you work, that if you're not also certified as a teacher, that you make far less money. And then, I mean, they'll have openings literally that will go open for like a year to 2 years. And when people apply, as soon as they find out about what the range is, they won't come because of that. And so that is something we have been really working hard. And I will say, I'm not saying we're totally there, but it's getting better to realize that if you don't pay professionals, they're not going to come and they won't stay. Let's see, we just got something else. Vicki said some districts discourage off-campus instruction due to liability. Yeah. I've heard of some that where like they weren't allowed to transport students. And so then it's like figuring out like, can you get a bus that can take you to, yeah, there's just a lot of maneuvering to like get them out of the building. So let's see, we have 2 more chats. Are the university programs recruiting? Aaron, I can promise you that it is like a daily task. And I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to talk about being a TBI or O&M. I am 100% about it. And anything that everybody can, do to everybody, when we meet someone who we think might be a really good fit, I always tell like the people in our program, like, you're actually our best recruiters. And the people that once they finish, I'm like, hey, if you find an amazing teacher who's kind of getting burned out of the classroom, but hey, but they really like working with our student, give them my email. So yeah, I'm trying, but I'm sure Justin's the same.
Yeah, I mean, basically about as busy as we can be, or at least as much as support from the university as we can get. And I mean, honestly, most places have funding and are like able to provide tuition and that kind of stuff too. And it's just, yeah. And I mean, part of it is we tend to have like very small classes. Like I've had 10 to 12 students in a cohort, and that is enough to manage. I know you do a lot more than that in Texas, Nora, but I mean, typically for us, that's about all we can typically handle. Okay.
There's
So
2 more in the chat, if you don't mind. Sorry.
okay.
So Kristen said California used to have a policy that you had to have a teaching license, or otherwise you couldn't teach K-12. That may have changed. Wow. And 3 new messages. Can I make a statement? Rebecca, absolutely. What statement would you like to make?
Mute. I'm trying to get on video. Oh yeah. I just wanted to say something encouraging, I hope. I've been doing O&M for a long time, and I just retired with the school district in Tennessee. And I was the only one doing O&M for this school district. Because of that, I took advantage of that and just said, look, this is how it needs to be run. And luckily, I had good professors at PCO and at Vanderbilt. And I just said, you have to go off campus. You have to do these things. This is how it is done. You don't know if a child can travel outside the school until you take them there. And so because of my insistence and stubbornness, I would say I really was allowed to take kids out. And eventually, one of the supervisors I had asked the district to buy a car for O&M so that I could take the children in the district car instead of my own car, which was a great relief. It was covered under regular insurance. So I just encourage O&Ms out there to be bold, because once they realize the importance of it, and if you're as passionate about it as I am, which I'm very passionate about O&M, and I think most O&Ms are, I think that they just need to hear from those of us who've been doing it a while that this is real life, and this is something that's going to make or break a student's success. That's my speech. Sorry. I just wanted to let you know my 2 cents.
Oh, but I totally agree with you. I mean,
Yeah.
we really are talking about important skills that really can make a difference in the rest of their life.
Yes. Yes.
I love
Thank
it.
you.
It does make you just want to go out there and say, yes, we can do this.
Thank
There
you.
may be a lot of advocacy work though. And it's easy
Okay.
to get discouraged. So thank you. It's nice to hear. It's like, yeah, we can do this.
I think we have a few more things in the chat, but I at least wanted to talk about this slide real quick. So we did ask specifically about if they considered how the student function in specific environments. And I mean, I think what we would expect, where pretty nearly all, over 90%, looking at the classroom. And again, we can see this for the TBIs, the O&Ms, and the ones that are dual certified, that going down a little bit for the playground, that going down more for stairs, and then travel in the hallways. And then if you look at the TBIs, down to 60% with the sidewalk on a school campus, and still O&Ms considering that to be like 95% important. And again, this is specific to referrals. So we also asked about like other environments and anything outside of that, like off school grounds in the community, anything like that. It was almost, I don't know the exact percentages, but like extremely, extremely low. So yeah, I think a lot of TBIs just don't really get access to seeing the student in those other kind of environments. I mean, in a lot of places, I know there might not even be a sidewalk readily available near the school, so that can be an issue too. Okay. Um, let's see. I was just looking at the chat.
You know, I did see where someone talked about like summer camps and working at summer camps, and then that kind of filtered into referrals. And that's a great idea, because there are so many camps, I think, in the summertime, and that's a great idea. And then there we just got one, Susanna, to know if this includes when students are in a transition program and doing tasks at job sites in the community, if that's considered an off-campus, if it's a school sponsored event. I'm not sure. It would make sense to me that it would just be part of their school day, but I'm not sure how that it would be considered like in every situation.
So I just wanted to show this real quick. I don't think I have enough time to really go through of any of these, but there's a link in the PowerPoint. I can put the same link into the chat. But basically, I've been like collecting different screening and like referral tools. And these are like the basics ones that I've kind of seen. Preschool eval from Tanny Anthony. There's the EVS O&M screening, which I think was from New York. Hill and Burke, which is also a preschool O&M screening, an O&M screening tool that I think is from the Michigan Department of Education. I don't remember where these are from. I think one is from TSBVI. And then I think there's another one from maybe I don't remember what region 10 is.
I think in that around Dallas in Texas is what I'm thinking, if I remember right.
Okay, that would make sense. And we also have a document that we kind of came up with, just very short, concise recommendations for people to consider. And you're welcome to use this, adapt it, change it however you like, but at least just trying to give a easy guide for people to look at and kind of what at least we think is most relevant. And kind of the same thing with the different screening tools. There's a lot of good ones. I don't think any of them are perfect from kind of what I've seen. Like, you want something that isn't going to require a lot of background knowledge from the individual, but still being able to look at like the important skills, concepts, those kind of things. So just some things that we kind of wanted to share. And again, we can put that link in the chat too. Oh, and then I actually had a list here. Okay. All right, just want to make sure we kind of get through everything at least. And we will, again, have time for questions. And I think we have another one coming up. So we also had O&M specialists participating in this survey and asking their perspectives on kind of what they see as like some of the potential issues with the referral process in their state. And so their response was having the TSVI, or teacher of students with visual impairments, or service coordinator determine the need has occasionally left some children out. Many think the baby has to be walking to benefit from O&M. Other times a district will have a student who may be fine in the school, so they are not recommended. These students may benefit from community travel or night blindness. So again, some of those things that I think it helps to have the O&M perspective and input, where we, I think, definitely need to look at services and early intervention more, and for either like specific community travel needs or things like night travel, which again, how can you assess that if you're only ever seeing the student during the daytime at school? It seems like a pretty fair point. Okay, so essentially, we were also looking for input. I mean, again, we've kind of developed a list and have a number of things, but like, what are people's perspectives? Are there things that are more important, less important? Any ideas on where people should focus? Kind of with the idea that in some places it just ends up being the TVI's decision because no one else is really available to give input. And thank you for sharing that link, Tina.
Well, maybe to kick off the discussion, I do remember that we had a number of the open-ended responses that talked about babies. Matter of fact, there were quite a few, and very much similar to saying that they really felt like there were babies that were being missed, and particularly if they weren't walking, that they just weren't being referred to them for possible like evaluation or service. What about others?
Oh, we have some questions.
Brandy's raising her hand, and we have using visual inclusion can help with assessing night low vision, low lighting travel. If
Yeah,
you're playing
that's a
in
good
the
idea,
hours of the
Desmond.
day.
And Brandy?
Well, I was just gonna ask if you meant how they are actually using their spatial awareness and just like looking at them to whether or not they know their surroundings and how much they actually can see if they need help, assistance, and a referral.
I think I'm a little unsure what you mean. Like just kind of observable travel
Observable,
skills?
yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely one of the primary considerations. But I mean, I think some of it also comes back to the environments, as they might be really good in some areas and not so good in others.
So Lacey put in the chat, bumping into furniture or piers, difficulties on stairs, and uneven terrain. Yeah, those are all great things. Lighting changes from Kristen.
Okay. Uh, I think, is this where I hand it off to you, Tina?
For Justin, that works for me. Yeah. Oh, if you're not allowed to go off campus to assess, create an obstacle course. That can be a lot of fun too. That's a great idea.
That would be fun.
Because it's not exactly what they're accustomed to. That's fun. So we asked the question that what were your priorities for O&M referrals? And so what they were able to do was able to use a rating scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being one of the most important. And these are the ones that had the percentage that were either somewhere in the 4 or up to the 5. So for acuity, for the TBIs, about 80%. O&Ms slightly higher at 92, and dual 95%. So over 80% for all. Same, 84 was the lowest for the next one for progressive conditions. Unfamiliar environments. So this one was with the TBIs at the lowest with the 69%. And I think that kind of goes back to some of our conversation. That doesn't surprise me. 81% for the O&Ms, and 75 for duly certified. So interviews, does that create a priority for an O&M referral? So TBIs with only 68%, but O&Ms 85%, and duly certified 78%. Current ability, that both the TBIs and duals rated 83 about the current ability as a priority for the O&M referral, lower for the O&M. And then stairs and curbs rated as a priority for 71% of the TBIs, and 77 and 78% for the O&M and duly certified, respectively. So here's a response from an O&M. I receive referrals from the TBIs in the district if they feel there is a need. Then I provide an assessment. Our team lead, who is not a specialist in visual impairment, created the O&M screening for the TBIs to use if they suspect there is a need. So it's funny because Justin and I we've actually had quite a conversation about this several times, because it's like, wait a minute. At first I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute. The team lead who, wait a minute, has an O&M on staff? Yes, but they instead created it rather than the O&M or even the TBI.
They must know best, clearly.
I still can't piece that one together. And sadly,
Yeah.
I suspect there's other places where that happens. Then what we really want to leave for the balance of the time, or until we, it's like, what are our future directions? How can we, both as a field, but also that this is just something very much of interest to Justin and me, and now Tessa, right, is now starting to work with us. But we're super interested in this, and how can we ensure there are more consistent and appropriate O&M referrals and assessments? And so we know we're just getting ready for that next step, but we're trying to figure out what that next step should be. And so we would really appreciate your input. What do you think that we could do, and what we all can do to help build some consistency?
I mean, we've definitely talked about this a number of different ways, and we've thought about
So
trying to come up with like a, oh, sorry.
No, Vicky was putting in the chat,
Yep.
consistency in training programs. You know, that's not that
Makes sense. That's a good place to start. I don't think we have consistency in our training programs either, so it's a good point.
I'm gonna write that down. Best practice.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too. I think we're, I guess, trying to establish what best practice is.
And there's one that, let's see, state regulations. I do know that one thing that has helped us, that as part of the FE LMA, is there has to be an assessment of the different ECC areas. And so that really has, like, you know, we'd had some kind of holdouts who had not wanted to do that, and that's kind of helped us, I think. And then Lacey said, I think a lot of it is educating those in higher positions of what we can do and how we can help students of all abilities. And Rita, education area of VI and O&M. And then Joanne, federal versus state providential requirements, regulations. Yeah, you know, I got to tell you that when IDEA is reauthorized, hopefully not in a terribly far future, would that not just be amazing that that became part of the regulations?
I feel
so-
like that might be farther off just because a lot of places would be far out of compliance very quickly.
Ooh, a dear colleague letter.
That's a nice idea too.
Paper tiger, but usually gets attention. I think there's some truth to that.
And I like at least the, I mean, federal and IDEA would be great. I think state regulations, or as you say, provincial, might be more realistic.
Isn't the this is from Kim? Isn't the California School for the Blind currently creating a state guideline? I think they have invited any person who wants to participate. This could help consistency. And then Julie echoed, I think there needs to be a standard criteria for all schools to do referrals. And then I think I missed one earlier. What are the criteria for OT, PT, speech, ID, and AU? And then we have,
Yeah, those are all good considerations.
they are. Susanna, consistency among school districts in the same state, and if it doesn't exist, there needs to be one website with a link to each state with regulations for TBI and O&M referrals, along with any crossover from among states. I think Carolyn, advocating for consistency in our industry and states maintaining standards and enhancing collaboration.
And just to speak about the like one resource or website that could have all of the state requirements, it's something I've actually worked on and has made some progress, but it's unbelievably hard to track that down for 50 states. And then I've also found that like you'll find it and then like 2 years later the link is just gone and it doesn't work anymore, and like they change their websites all the time. So that has been a project, but harder than you would think it would be. So we have our references and emails, and basically we're happy to talk if anyone has other questions, but that is at least most of what we had to cover. Thank you all for attending, participating.
Oh, the ending code is assessment.
Oh, so we do have a question from Rhonda, trying to confirm if she's still an OMSA member.
Rhonda, this is Kristen Offlinger. I will look that up and I will shoot you an email.
Thank you, Kristen.
And thank you, everybody, on a Thursday night for hanging out with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Glad you're here.
This is Nora from TTU. Thank you so much. I have two groups of students that could attend tonight for extra credit. And so they have a form that they will need to fill out. But I thought this was really relevant to our basic O&M class, especially for the teachers of the visually impaired students, as well as the new O&M students. So thank you very much. It was well done.
Thank you, Nora.
Appreciate that.
Thank you for bringing your students.
Absolutely.
I should do that more often too.
I know. I just thought that. I was like, okay, darn it. I should have offered some points too.
We've been lucky. I have asked Eileen many times, and every time she's been willing to have the students come to each one of these, and it's been very helpful, and they love the extra credit.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. So Brandy, we put a link to the PowerPoint, and want us to put it back in the chat. Let me see if I can find that same
I
one.
can get it. It's from the
Great.
beginning. I think I can get it.
And then AJ says, is there a way to get a copy of the recording? And I'm not sure the answer to that. Sorry.
Where does the recording get posted? Is it Live Binders?
Yes, live binders, and it'll be between 30 and 60 days.
And the link to Live Binders is on our website, right?
Yes, go to omsa.us or USOMSA, the website. I'll put that on in the chat.
Thank you. All right, there's that. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Oh, good. She just found it.